Hey, how you doing? This is Adam Post, publisher of more than 1,000 comic books and marketing expert covering Trump fires woke top general, consolidates power in the Pentagon. President Trump fired General C.Q. Brown, the nation's highest-ranking military officer, in a late-night Pentagon shakeup that also removed other top officials. This is the guy that was focused on diversity, equity, and inclusion. You certainly can't have that guy as the top military official advising a president who's serious about doing the right things for the country. Brown was replaced by retired Lieutenant General Dan Kane, also known as Raisin Kane, who helped Trump defeat ISIS in Iraq. Kane is a little-known officer with close ties to Trump, raising concerns about political loyalty taking precedence over experience, because he was a 3-star general and not a 4-star general. And there are other 4-star generals that are very insulted because Trump picked the person that he knew could get the job done, that he knew he could trust. And the issue with the Pentagon is that they're tied into the military-industrial complex. And yes, this guy, General Kane, actually is part of an equity fund, but in any case, Trump feels he can trust this guy, and there's a lot of serious stuff that needs to get done. Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth framed the firings as a move to refocus the military on warfighting rather than diversity and legal constraints. Democrats and military experts condemned the decision, arguing it undermines the professionalism and stability of the armed forces. You do have to have some kind of leadership and focus at the Pentagon, letting people know that we have priorities that don't have to do with diversity, equity, and inclusion. And now we have that. At least Trump's appointed him. He does have to be confirmed by the Senate still. And that's not all that's going on at the Pentagon. DOGE is hooked up with the Pentagon. They will be cutting all kinds of expenses. But immediately, like coming in the next few days, they're going to be cutting 5,400 employees. The Pentagon is cutting 5,400 probationary civilian workers and implementing a hiring freeze starting next week. The Department of Government Efficiency, also known as DOGE, has compiled lists of employees set for termination, though military personnel are exempt so far. The Trump administration is making widespread job cuts across federal agencies, including the Forest Service and IRS, and multiple agencies. But it's also good to keep in mind that the Clinton administration got rid of 400,000 federal workers. Trump is nowhere near yet 400,000 federal workers. We kind of wish he would be. But he does have to be a little bit careful when he's getting rid of people, and that's what him and his team are doing. Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth supports the cuts, arguing that they will reduce bureaucratic waste and strengthen combat forces. Also, which does go unsaid, was that, of course, the prior administration put in their own people when they were doing all of this probationary hiring. So all of these new people are also getting rid of all the people that came in under the prior administration that may lack qualifications, or at the very least be the kind of people you wouldn't necessarily want in these positions. And I'm sure a lot of these people are actually good people. The problem is the prior administration was so ridiculous and so corrupt and so focused on the wrong kinds of things that weren't right for the country, things like the DEI policies, that you can't keep those people if there's any way that you can possibly get rid of them. And that's what they're doing. The Defense Department is also reviewing $50 billion in potential budget cuts to reallocate funds to Trump's priorities. The Pentagon is notorious for having hidden amounts of money that can't be accounted for, like literally in the trillions of dollars, even though they have a budget that is over $800 billion every year. And it makes you wonder, how can this organization get $800 billion, almost $1 trillion, not be able to pass an audit, not be able to show where the money is going, and continue to get those kinds of funds? At some point that has to stop, because when people know that there's no proper accounting for money being spent, it's way too easy for money to go in the wrong places. Inefficiency is one thing, corruption is another thing, but ultimately, we actually do need the Pentagon to function properly. Secretary Hegseth is also asking for major cuts every year at the Pentagon. Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth has ordered the Pentagon to prepare for 8% annual budget cuts over the next 5 years, signaling a major shift in military spending. Despite the cuts, Trump's priorities like border security and eliminating wasteful government programs remain protected from reductions. Congress may resist these cuts, as many lawmakers are wary of potential impacts on military operations and jobs in their districts. And a lot of that does come down to jobs in their districts, because part of what you do to pay people back It is a normal thing in business, and it's even a wider spread thing in government, is that you give a big contract to produce planes. But it doesn't have to be planes. It can be anything for the government. And by providing a big contract to produce work for the government, that provides paid good jobs in a local congressional district. So Congress does think about those things. At the same time, of course, we've got to focus on what's right for the country. The Department of Government Efficiency is involved in workforce restructuring, pushing to replace Pentagon employees with contractors. The cuts have sparked a heated debate over whether this move is a genuine cost-saving measure or a political maneuver to reshape military spending priorities. The whole DOGE operation is definitely interested in saving money. At the same time, the highest priority really seems to be completely cutting off and disabling people who are oppositional to the federal government. People who have their own little separate bureaucratic operations that are not so little, that get millions and billions of dollars in contracts and resources and money from the federal government that all the taxpayers pay for. That's why they went after USAID first, because USAID was funding a lot of what goes on in Washington. And you can tell a lot of that money was going to Washington because as USAID got cut off from funding, many people in Washington, D.C. all of a sudden are selling their houses. Coming from Politico, Trump fires top military leaders in unprecedented shakeup. The Friday night terminations include Chair of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, General C.Q. Brown. And from the Associated Press, Pentagon says it will cut 5,400 probationary workers starting next week. And from the fake New York Times, Hegseth orders Pentagon to draw up plans for cuts. There are definitely major changes happening at the Pentagon. President Donald Trump fired Chair of the Joint Chiefs, General C.Q. Brown, on Friday night and said that he intends to dismiss the Navy's top admiral in the Air Force's second in command, an unprecedented shakeup of the Pentagon's top brass that will trigger ripple effects throughout the military. Trump, in a Truth Social post, said he was nominating retired Air Force Lieutenant General Dan Raising Kane to take Brown's place. Kane is a partner at Shield Capital, a venture capital firm. Somehow, if you're a general, that qualifies you to go into venture capital. There's a lot of that going on, and that's usually a military-industrial complex thing. Just having a general associated with your venture capital firm adds credibility to your venture capital firm. Does it make somebody honest? Does it make them dishonest? If Trump trusts them, that's all that Trump's concerned about. Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth, minutes later, said in a statement that he's requesting nominations for replacements for Chief of Naval Operations Lisa Franchetti and Air Force Vice Chief General James Slife. The Pentagon chief also said he was looking for new nominations for senior judicial officers, the service's top lawyers, for the Army, Navy, and Air Force. The firings wipe away decades of military experience and could create a cascade of hasty promotions down the ranks that impact U.S. leadership across the globe. As much as many of these guys have all types of military experience that we should respect and appreciate, no general, no individual was held accountable for what they did in the Afghanistan withdrawal. That's something you can pick out other things, but the Afghanistan withdrawal is something that no matter what people's political interests or persuasion are, it's clear that was mishandled. And it was allowed to be mishandled without open criticism of what was going on, even if you knew it shouldn't be done and you had no authority to stop it from being done. None of these people, not one of these people being laid off, fired, gotten rid of, retired, not one of them spoke up and said, you know something, this was wrong. This should not have been done this way. It's not like Americans who were in the military service didn't die over this withdrawal. They did. So who was there to speak out against it? None of these guys. That's why really all the top leadership has to go. We can't have a repeat of something like that where people don't have the responsibility and the dignity to stand up and say, you know something, this is wrong and we need to have accountability for it. Brown's firing became public while he was in Texas visiting troops on the southern border, and days after he huddled with European allies at a defense leaders summit in Germany. Franchetti learned of her firing in a call from Hegseth on Friday night. Both had been historic picks. Franchetti was the first woman to serve on the Joint Chiefs. Brown, who was tapped by Trump to be the Air Force's top officer in 2020 before ascending to the military's top job under former President Joe Biden, had been just the second black chair. And it's a great accomplishment that the guy was black. I'm just tired of hearing that in these stories. Just please serve your country. You're in a very important position. We don't care about the historicness of what your sexual preferences are or your gender or your race. Just do the job or get out of the job. Brown's 4-year term would have run through September 2027, although Trump had the authority to remove him. Such a decision, though, exposes a lack of confidence in the current crop of military leaders and signals to officials that they can be fired at any time. Well, said one defense official caught off guard by the news. Trump and Hegseth offered little justification for the dramatic firings, but the Pentagon chief said it was part of an effort to put in place, quote, new leadership that will focus our military on its core mission of deterring, fighting, and winning wars. You can't step out and make diversity, equity, and inclusion a priority when you're in charge of an organization that is supposed to be setting an example for military forces. General Brown had long been a target of congressional Republicans who accused the Pentagon of prioritizing diversity and inclusion programs over the military's fundamental tasks. Defense officials have feared for weeks that Trump would remove Brown based on the perception he's out of step with the president on those programs. When Trump urged the Defense Department to crack down on the George Floyd protests in 2020, because, those people were burning down buildings and looting stores. And those are the protests that Trump was talking about. He wasn't talking about people peacefully walking around with signs. That's no problem. What is a problem is violence in the streets and looting and complete social disorder. That is actually a problem and needed to stop. However, General Brown spoke publicly about the challenges of rising through the military as a black man. Brown appeared to briefly come back into Trump's good graces, interacting together at the Army-Navy football game ahead of the inauguration. And on his first day at the Pentagon, Hegseth indicated he supported the military leader. The decision to replace him with Kane is an unusual one. Pulling a former officer from retirement isn't unprecedented. Defense Secretary Donald Rumsfeld did the same in 2003, so General Peter Schoomaker could serve as Army Chief of Staff. But a retired military officer who, like others, was granted anonymity to speak frankly about a fast-moving issue, pointed out that a 3-star general has never been nominated as the chairman of the Joint Chiefs. The idea being that you should be a 4-star general because the people that are 4-star generals deserve a first chance to get into this position. That's not the case. When you're looking for results and you're looking for people that know what they're doing and are going to be focused, that you can actually trust, that's the priority in the Trump administration. Trump has also said that General Kane wore a MAGA hat during their 2018 meeting in Iraq, which is against military regulations. Senate Armed Services Chair Roger Wicker made no mention of Kane in his Friday night statement congratulating Brown for his decades of honorable service to our nation. The move led to an immediate uproar from Democrats on Capitol Hill. Quote, firing C.Q. Brown as Joint Chiefs Chair is completely unjustified, according to House Armed Services Ranking Member Representative Adam Smith from Washington. He went on to say, quote, smart, competent leader to be replaced by a retired 3-star? More weakening of America. These people have no shame. And speaking of no shame, some Democratic lawmakers ascribed a racial motive to Brown's firing. Brown, quote, earned his position as chairman of the Joint Chiefs, and his firing is a disgrace, according to Representative Gregory Meeks, the House Affairs Committee's top Democrat. He went on to say, quote, for this administration, if you're black, qualifications don't matter. They only see people of color as DEI hires. That's absolutely not true. However, the whole push for DEI hiring, we are not hiring based on merit, where you're saying that merit is some kind of a dog whistle or something like that, is causing people to listen to what you're saying and associate people with what you've actually been saying. And it is a problem, and it's not fair to people. But it was never fair to people to begin with. It was just a way to seize power ridiculously. Senator Jim Banks loves the idea. He said this, quote, making our military great again means destroying wokeness and firing the generals that promoted it. We must focus on lethality. President Trump is right to clean house. No one forced this general to promote wokeness and DEI and nonsense in the military ranks. If you're going to do something like that, at the very least, you should expect you're going to get fired. And from the Associated Press, Pentagon says it will cut 5,400 probationary workers starting next week. The Defense Department said Friday that it's cutting 5,400 probationary workers starting next week and will put a hiring freeze in place. With civilian employees, there seems to be about a 6% attrition rate, meaning whatever the size of the federal workforce is, 6% of it tend to leave every year. So a hiring freeze is really a cut of 6%. What they're looking to do is at least double that 6%, with getting rid of the probationary workers. The freeze comes after staffers from the Department of Government Efficiency were at the Pentagon earlier in the week and received lists of such employees. They said those lists did not include uniformed military personnel who are exempt. Probationary employees are generally those on the job for less than a year and who have yet to gain civil service protections. Darren Selnick, who's acting Undersecretary of Defense for Personnel and Readiness, said this in a statement, quote, "We anticipate reducing the department's civilian workforce by 5 to 8% to produce efficiencies and refocus the department on the president's priorities and restoring readiness in the force." And from the New York Times, Hegseth orders Pentagon to draw up plans for cuts. The defense secretary has told senior leaders to prepare to trim 8% from the budget over each of the next 5 years, according to officials. Part of this might be strategic, where he wants to see where the heads are at of the people that are in his organization. Will these people target the same kind of things that the Doge people would target? What priorities do his top people say can be cut and addressed over the next 5 years? Even if none of the cuts happen, it will tell him literally where all these people's heads are at within the organization. A really smart move. Let me know what you think of all this in the comments below. Always love to see your ideas. Please be sure you are subscribed to the channel. Click the bell for notifications, give me a thumbs up, and I'll see you again soon with another story. And if I don't see you, I will miss you.